Very much for joining us on the modern job search checklist. We stream to and using Restream to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Of course, the Twitter you'll have to look at my timeline. There's nothing really broad you can see there. Thank you very much for joining us every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. We're here trying to give the best job search advice if possible. We kind of dig a little deep into what you should be doing with your interviews, resumes, and so forth. So we hope that you'll find it fun as well as interesting. Let's start something in the chat. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. And if you're always joining us, welcome back. Uh, Say hi to us in the chat. Let us know that you're here. Want to always welcome my co host, Damian Birkel. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. Thank you. As always, excited to be here.
Absolutely. And we have Teddy Burris with us. Teddy is the co-founder or founder really of Burris Consulting, and he is joining us today. He has a regular web talk show with one of our other guests, Randy. So welcome to the show, Teddy. How are you?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me come in and play with you guys today.
Well, thank you. And we had to have Teddy back for us, but for you guys, it's the first time because there was a recording faux pas uh, the last time we tried to do this. So we got you this time, and we hope you join us again. Join us in the chat, ask your questions. We're willing to stop talking about what we're talking about up here to help talk about what you need down there. So, and I was just reminded I spelled Teddy's name wrong. So I'll have to fix that during the time. And thank you for being gracious, Teddy. In
No,
the
they can't
meantime,
find me, man. We don't put two R's in Burris Consulting. They can't find me, and then I whimper.
yes, I understand. You convinced me. In the meantime, let's get into the show. We want to get started because we've got a lot of great things to talk about. We definitely want to get into interviewing, and there's a lot of noise out there. And of course, I cover a lot of that noise on the other show. But standing out is one thing that candidates don't seem to do well whenever, and presentation is often a problem when coming before an employer that they've never been involved with before. So one of the things that we want to kind of establish here is to kind of help people stand out, be unique in their approach. What's the one thing candidates fail to do during interviews to stand out, Teddy?
Oh, Lordy. Probably the most important thing that I think candidates fail to do to stand out is to, with their best intentions and sincerity,
Mhm.
ask the right business focused questions.
Hmm.
Candidates show up for interviews all the time and they want to get lost in the weeds. They want to get lost in the minutia and they don't get up on top of the real business goals in an interview questions or interview conversation. And when they're given the opportunity, which by the way, I think the fact that two humans are facing each other is the opportunity for asking questions mutually. But when they're given the opportunity to ask a question, they get down in the weeds and they fail to really focus on the business goals that this candidate can help solve.
Mhm. Yeah. So, Damon, your input there?
It's very much related to what Teddy said. The only goal of a first interview is to get a second interview. If you do not concentrate on building rapport with connecting with the person that you're interviewing, the chances of you going forward in the process are very slim, because in addition to the business focused strategic questions that you're going to want to ask, it basically goes like this. If I like you, I may hire you, and if I don't, I won't. And if you focus on building rapport
Mhm.
that first interview, then you don't worry about salary because you're not going to talk about it. And if you have done your homework, done your research, and are prepared, then by being able to look the person in the eye and not be afraid to smile and talk to them like they were or are your best friend, the interviewer will walk away with the feeling that this person's all right. I think that they might fit into our organization because, when you boil it all down, if you don't play well in the corporate sandbox, you're not going to last in the long haul.
Yeah.
Because again, at the very, very bottom, at the base of any candidate moving forward, it's with the knowledge that there's a excellent chance that they're going to fit. And if you don't come across as being able to demonstrate that and kind of exude that feeling, then
Mhm.
you will be stuck in the weeds and you will kind of blend in with everybody else.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I can add to that, I think a part of all that is getting to know the employer better. Many times, I think people are still winging it instead of trying to find out more information.
Mhm.
Instead of they're trying to find out, try to answer 20 questions. I would try to answer 3 or 4 questions and go deep on those 3 or 4 questions, because part of that too is being able to ask questions back to the employer, which surprisingly, on all levels that I've heard of, and having talked to a number of employers and people who I tangle with on LinkedIn, one of the things is that people, you know, the employer feels that if you don't ask questions back, you don't. And if you're not researching my company, you don't really
Mhm.
care about my company. And for a lot of people who are interviewing, they care enough to screen the right person and be that gatekeeper. And you should be trying to ask other questions. If people don't offer information, your job is try to go answer the questions that aren't ask the questions that aren't answered in any of your other research that you do on a company. And I think that people don't go deep, really, deep enough. If they went deep enough, they could find out a lot of questions that they don't have to ask. But then again, too, I think there's an advantage of asking questions that you already know the answer to, and being able to see what that answer is in some cases, because you want to know. And I think one of the questions that should be on everybody's lips these days is, how did you lead, or how did you handle the COVID crisis? How did you transition home? How did you transfer back to hybrid? And to be able to discover that, you don't have to answer that question, but I think that's very important for you to answer, because that will tell you what kind of company that you're going to be dealing with, and that you should be able to proceed further. Damien, did you have anything to add from what between what Teddy and I have offered so far?
Yeah, I think that candidates that are coming for a job interview really need to have, in addition to the pandemic, which Mark, I think is just an excellent question, several other questions. So again, you can begin to discern if you feel that this is a match for you. And Teddy knows I have been out of work and have had to go through the agony of interviews and
Mhm.
waiting for the second or the third interview. But here's a few questions. Oh, and I know what I was going to say. When I went into an interview, I felt that I had every bit as much a right to interview the interviewer and the
Mhm.
company as they did of interviewing me.
Yeah.
So some of the questions that I would ask back when I was asked, and in the interview dynamics, you can tell that the interview is winding down and coming to an end when the person that's interviewing you says, do you have any questions? And most say no, and that is not the correct procedure, if you will. These questions include, how long has this position been open? Or maybe it's a new position. And if it's a new position, why is it being created?
Mhm.
That's the reason why I came down to North Carolina, because a new position was being created. Another question to ask is, can you tell me what a typical day is like in this position? And no matter where they are in the corporate um, ladder of life, depending on who you're interviewing with, sometimes you get some very interesting answers that
Mhm.
don't necessarily uh, add up, and that's a red flag. Um, Another question that you want to ask, and I'm sure there's a more polite way to put it, but what you're looking to find out is, where does the position that you're interviewing for and the division that you're in, where does that fall in the corporate structure? Are you being de-emphasized slowly and dying? Or are you in a growth area, and is there lots of funding, and is it go, 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 go? The reason why you want to find that out is, if you join a ship that is slowly sinking,
Mhm.
then your long-term uh, efficacy in that position could be threatened. However,
Mhm.
you might be able to post from within. If you're in a go, go, go position, then you know that there is lots of opportunity, and an opportunity for potentially quick advancement. So those are the types of
Yeah.
questions that you want to ask at the conclusion, or as it's winding down, of every interview that you're in.
Yeah, good
You
stuff
know,
there. Good.
I'll add to that. I mean, the ability to have an open conversation and ask the right questions and engage is powerful. Um, Additionally, another big failure that lots of us have in different scenarios, including interviews, is our mindset.
Mhm.
We either walk in to the interview with a mindset of, I've got this, I'm just as qualified as anybody else, and I can help them solve their problems and grow this business or achieve the goals they want to achieve. It's a very profound, competent um, mindset to have in anything that you do in life. And by the way, if you don't believe you can do that, you shouldn't be in that interview. Or the other mindset that candidates have is, oh, I hope and pray they like me, and maybe my resume is going to get by, and I don't deserve to be here. That negative mindset should never come into any conversation where you're looking to achieve. Actually, it shouldn't come into anything you do in life,
Mhm.
especially in an interview where you're trying to prove that you have the ability to do the things they need to do. So mindset is powerful. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people, when I've interviewed these folks, a lot of people come to this interview hoping and praying and not truly believing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Teddy, I think an offshoot of that, and I think a lot of that comes from the residue from their last job. And I think a lot of people want to interview because of the bad experiences or the uncomfortable experience of, no matter how long they've been at their job, because some people stay uncomfortable for 3, 5, 10 years even in a job, and they're bringing that baggage to the next interview instead of focusing in on each interview as its own conversation. And I think people tend to ask the questions that have been addressed as their last jobs as weaknesses. So they're bringing that baggage along, as well as just the doubt and the fears that they have because they have some sort of PTSD. And I think it does exist
Yes.
somewhat. If you've
Yes.
been bombshelled from your last job, and you could have been bombshelled for years, you may have all this experience. You're bringing that, not only the emotional baggage, but you're also bringing the spiritual damage, as far as the doubt and the fear that comes with it. And so, therefore, people use that to jump off their questions or to respond to a question that requires them to go back. And
Yeah.
when you're asked a lot of questions like, why did you do this, or something of that sort, people often have to dig into their why bag and go into their past, and it's usually dark when you don't resolve your past even.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of psychological things that go into those things. And I know that, Damien, you talk about not. I think there's an unemployment wave that you talked about in your book, and some other places that you've done, and some webinars that you've done. But I think there's also the last employer skin that needs to be shed, that can also be a lot like, emotionally, the unemployment wave of what you talk about.
Absolutely. And I would like to, in the future, do an entire show on post-delayed stress
Uh-huh.
syndrome, which is very special to me because in the early 70s, I was an assistant to the doctor who actually, I was there when he coined the phrase
Hmm.
because so many Vietnam veterans were coming to him on the GI Bill after Vietnam, and that launched the whole phenomena to where we are today. And Mark, you're really the first person, I mean, other than myself, that talks about the post traumatic stress of a job,
Hmm.
Hmm.
because there is hangover, if you will, that does follow you, especially if you have been traumatized and have been in fear of your job for a long period of time. And now,
Hmm.
finally, enough is enough, right? Welcome to the great
Hmm.
resignation.
Hmm.
You've had the courage to reach out and land an interview, and tying into what Teddy was saying, uh, mindset is critical, and you have to learn. You have to give yourself permission to kind of step outside
Hmm.
of yourself from the standpoint of leave all that baggage at the door, and it all still comes back to building genuine rapport,
Hmm.
because I have had candidates that I've interviewed, and we all know people like this that go way overboard when they're
Hmm.
interviewing in terms of being, happy, 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 uh, and you know just by the way that they answer that it's not sincere.
They're
That it's
masking something.
thank
Yeah,
you very much.
overcompensation.
Yeah.
Yes. Uh, that's the one type of interviewer that sends off bells and whistles. And then the other type on the other extreme, which I think is what Teddy was talking about, is the type of person who interviews in their mind like a second class citizen. And although they may get all the right answers, at the end of the day, when people get together after the interview and talk about it,
Hmm.
they are branded as being too needy. And if you are labeled as being too needy, the chances of you going forward are very slim, because, quite frankly, given the pace of business the way that it is, and the fact that we're now a diverse workforce
Hmm.
and scattered, there is no time for babysitting. And although you may be the most qualified person, the most qualified candidate, if you come across as needy, they're going to go on to the next person.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really and you're I think is spot on, and there's a sense of that, especially if you're trying to close an interview. And I think one of the things that people tend to do is that uh, they try to do everything in that meeting, but don't realize, oh, you can also follow up and
Mhm.
also bring some of the good stuff along with you at that particular time. And I think you don't have to tell everything, even in the last interview. You just got to make sure that they understand what the value that you're offering is more than just the one or two statements that you made during the meeting. Even
Mhm.
if they just pick out one or two, there's more, and you want to be able to bring that to follow up as well. Teddy?
Absolutely. I mean, um, as Damien said, the first interview, the goal was to get to the next interview, get to the next conversation, or get to the panel interview. At every step of the way, the goal of that conversation is to keep the conversation moving. So
Mm-hmm.
you've got to give the interviewer the information in the way that you can build trust, respect, and like with them. But by the
Mm-hmm.
way, you wouldn't be there for the most part if they didn't believe you had the technical skills.
Yeah.
Mhm.
For the most part, they would not. You wouldn't be there if you didn't know how to swing the hammer they want you to swing.
Yeah.
So you got to speak to that, but you've also got to build that rapport. You got to build that trust. So this is sales 101, by the way, which is interviewing as a sales tactic. You've got to work to build that trust through the conversation and the engagement, not through just answering questions,
Mhm.
Yeah.
to get to the next step so that they feel comfortable about, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to the department head. I think it'd be a great conversation. And when you got that recruiter listening to you and asking
Mm-hmm.
you broader and broader questions, beyond the scripted questions they feel obligated to ask, you're winning. You're heading the right direction. But you've got to believe that you're capable, and capable of what? Capable of serving their needs, solving the problems that they present to you, not the problems you think they
Mhm.
have. That will be a huge mistake after being married for 43 years. Solving the problems that they ask you to solve or ask you to help them address. So, yeah,
Yeah,
get
that's
to
a
the next
great
step.
and those are great points, which made me think, since the theme of the show is about almost being hired, I think that's the point where people often they try to get narrower because they're insecure about what's happened. All the imposter syndrome, the doubts and things like that, they don't read it as, they're close to the finish line. Many times they think that they're kind of like there's still doubt. And I think that that's what keeps people from closing. What do you think,
Well, they
Damon?
oversell.
Oh,
They
go ahead.
that
Great
Yeah,
point.
they
Yes.
oversell. I can tell.
Yes.
I'll give you an example. I had an $8 million project I was working on, and this project I was working on, the business developer who was selling me the software involved in this project,
Hmm.
I told her, I said, keep your pants on, be calm. It might take 6 months, but we will get back to it, and we plan to buy your application. But it
Hmm.
was a huge project, and we didn't need that software until later on. It seems like every month she would call me up and say, "Hey, Teddy, I want to make sure that you're still made this decision and you're going to hire me or buy my product or whatever." And I said, "No, we're good." She goes, "Well, you know what? I'm going to give you another 5% discount." She gave me 3 discounts. She kept selling to me, even though I'd already committed to buy the product.
Yeah.
And this is where candidates do the same thing. They go, "Oh man, I got more I can do. I got more I can do." By the way, I've made this own mistake myself in my business, where I didn't believe they were ready to make a decision to have me do it because it takes time.
Hmm.
And I went back and I kept trying to sell them. And I know for a fact I've lost business because I've oversold.
And
Mhm.
that's where less is more.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That is where less is more, and you've got to know the cutoff because the insecurity begins to appear out of all the things we've already talked about. And once because employers can also change their mind in as much that they're sold on you, they can be unsold, and you can undo all the progress that you've made because you're trying to. Or it's like the left knee is damaged and you limp on that, so you begin to use the right leg a little bit more. After you use that up, then you're hurting, and it's very hard to walk when both legs are gone.
Yeah.
Damien?
Yeah.
Yeah, what I was going to say is absolutely right about oversell, and there's two phenomena that I have noticed actually increasing. The one is the time between interviews continues to grow, and
Mm-hmm.
part of that is because of the fact that now that the workforce has been scattered, and I know in little bits and pieces, everybody's starting to either do hybrid or maybe they're being forced back into work, which I think is a mistake, or they're still working from home. And so what that does is that automatically adds time to the
Mm-hmm.
length between one interview and another. And if you're a candidate and don't realize that, you can get anxious very quickly. And I've talked to a number of people down off the ceiling of late saying,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, slow down. That's that's what you need to do. And OPS, now that you're in this process, go out and find another 3 positions so that if this one doesn't work out, you constantly have something in the works. So you're
Yes.
not caught flat footed. And then the
Mm-hmm.
other thing is, and I think, Mark, you said this, or it may have been Teddy, about the interviewing changing. And what I mean by that is uh, candidate A comes through, they're number one, they check off most of what can be done. But
Mm-hmm.
in the course of the interview, they say, and also uh, I could do A, B, and C. And so right then and there, that position becomes the position plus A, B, C. And then it goes on to the next person. And it can become that position plus A, B, C, D, and E, and so on and so forth. So that what basically happens many times is the position description slides a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. And as a result, sometimes very qualified candidates that were in initially get knocked out because management allows the position to morph into something more or less than what it was originally. And the 5 o'clock club will tell you that eight, eight out of every 10 solid positions that you are interviewing will fall away without your ability to plan, anticipate, or control. And you may never know why,
Mm-hmm.
or you may find out that the owner hired his idiot son in law who had
Mm-hmm.
no qualifications. And that's why it's so important to keep the ball rolling and not exude that pleading mentality of please, 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 please hire me. Go with the flow, keep moving, keep those additional positions coming in so that, again, you're not caught flat footed, because I can't tell you the number of people I've worked with through the years who just say, okay, I got it in the bag, I got this position, and they stop. And
Mm-hmm.
then they get bowled over when they don't get the position. And then after 2 or 3 weeks of shock, they have to start all over again, rather than the person who kept that job in perspective and kept rolling so that they never hit a hard stop. They just pick up and continue to move along with the process.
Mm-hmm. Teddy?
Yeah, I've had a conversation even recently with somebody unemployed. He got, and Damien knows this. Once you get one interview or once you get one offer, then the rest of them, that opens the door for the rest of them to show up. And this guy goes, "Hey man, I got an offer. I'm thinking about accepting it. I haven't decided yet, but I got 2 or 3 interviews that come up. And how do I tell them I'm not going to interview?" I'm like, "You're not going to tell them you're not going to interview. You're going to go to those interviews." "Well, why? I've got a job offer in my hand." You have no idea what those other interviews are going to offer you. If somebody wants to have a conversation with you, have a conversation. I don't care if you've been married to the woman for 43 years and you're 12 years in a business and someone wants to talk to me about another job opportunity, Damien, not another, woman, but a job opportunity, I'm going to have a conversation about that job. You may have just agreed to take that job and the start date's a week later and you got 3 interviews between now and the start date. Do those interviews. This is business. And business says you need to make sure you're aligning yourself with the best possible place, with the best possible package of compensation, even though you may have just taken a job. Now, you may go ahead and take that job and not take those and not consider those other offers that come in, but never turn down a conversation. That's a huge mistake.
And I love what you just said, because I think in this day, there's still candidates who are going through extended interview processes. And if you have just one interview, you're working from a place from scarcity. And I think a lot of people are so used to trying to just take the interview that they can get and then get the job. I understand at one point, and I think in our economy, and I think in the Great Recession, where there were people who interviewed around and only got one job offering. And I get that. I think these days people are likely to get more than one if they do the right work and do their due diligence. In fact, that's your place to where you won't have to operate from scarcity, in the sense that you can get multiple interviews. And really, I've even suggested to one person, after they took the offer, to go ahead and still go ahead and interview even after they started shortly after the job, because they were looking for the best situation as possible. And you have more intel now. You've started a job. This person was a few weeks in, and they were asking questions to the employer about the way they operated, because now that you're in, you're seeing the tea leaves. Said, I may not be happy for more than a few months here. I'm gonna go ahead and interview, and don't feel bad that you tell the new that I decide to take another opportunity because this doesn't fit. You have more intel now, and I think that is the whole deal. Everybody won't be able to do that, but I think the whole idea is to have as many options as possible. You don't want to stop those options, even if you're a year in and somebody wants to have a conversation with you. Have the conversation. Don't stop it because you got employed. Go ahead, Teddy.
Now, in that context, we have to be careful. Again, I joke about being married, and I'm blessed that I've got a woman who's tolerated me this long, and she claims to want to keep tolerating me. But people will hop from job to job because they think it's a nickel better, the grass is better, that kind of stuff. You can't do that. That will set you up for failure long term, and that'll set you up to be unliked by recruiters. So that goes back to this whole premise. If you're going to sit down and have a conversation with someone about a job, if they offer it to you, don't go, "I want it," just because it's a nickel better or grass a little greener. Do your due diligence. Make sure you understand the sandbox that you're getting into, and is it the right sandbox? Just don't have a knee-jerk reaction, yes or no. Because when you do your due diligence, you'll understand more about the culture, the potential. You understand more about the team, the leadership. You understand more about the industry and their products, their services, their solutions, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you'll have a better understanding. Is this where I want to be? Do I truly believe I can be happy here with all of this intel? And because if you don't have that intel, you're going to make rash decisions, and that will not be productive either.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I might we could teeter tattle on the job hopping aspect of it, and I know that we can
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
have a lengthy discussion. But what I'm ultimately saying is that you don't want to, being that you have more information, assuming that you've had a number of interviews. I would say that don't just settle because it looks like, it just be fixated on one. Consider the possibilities. Ultimately, we're saying
yeah,
it, Damien.
Yeah, and the other thing that kind of ties this whole thing together is if you follow the right protocol,
Mm-hmm.
which is 80%, if not more, of your time networking and 15 to 20% on the internet, your job search is going to look like this. And I actually did a graph, but the first line is the bottom line, and the bottom line is your uh, your uh, simply hired or Indeed or whatever niche website that you use, and it goes like this: got a response, didn't get a response, got a response, didn't get a response, and it goes along like that. The other one is where you are doing informational interviewing, and
Mm-hmm.
you learn and you go up and up and up, and then you get to a point like this, and like Teddy said, you have built up enough momentum, you have enough stuff in the works that it seems like it's magic, but
Mm-hmm.
really what it isn't. It's all of that hard work, and you have the work that you've done on the bottom, internet and what have you, intersecting with the hard work that you've done building your curated LinkedIn community through networking. That, yeah, all of a sudden things start to pop, and it is not uncommon at all to continue to get job opportunities, interview opportunities
Mm-hmm.
2, 3 months later, because in my experience, to get to that point where you're at that top, it takes a minimum of 90 days to get there and 90 days for it to kind of wear down. And sometimes you'll get opportunities 6 months, even 12 months out, if you have followed the protocol and have done
Mm-hmm.
everything the right way. And who knows where you're going to be in 2 months or 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
stick
Some
to the
people
plan.
Some people are getting offers after a couple of years, recent months,
Mhm.
after having interviewed with a company or applied, even not even an interview. They're getting callbacks, getting callbacks. Say, hey, remember when you talked to us back in 2019? We'd like to have another discussion with you. It's like,
yeah.
oh gosh, for
Well,
real?
that Mark plays off this other philosophy as well that, and that is if I get people say this all the time, right? Damien's heard this a million times. Oh, I can't interview during the holidays. Nobody's doing anything. And now we're hearing, oh, I can't interview the company now. Nobody's hiring. I can't have a conversation with someone in that company now because nobody's hiring. It's not about whether or not they're hiring. It's about discovering them and they discovering you so that when they are ready, they're going to have your name top of mind and call you.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Too
and that,
often we do these informational interviews or these conversations in the hopes that somebody's got a job in their pocket, and that doesn't happen.
right. Right. And you know that you're doing it right when you've been articulating your value the correct way, and some people don't get it until later, or for the fact in many people's cases now that they're being turned down by candidates more than they should be because of the way they've managed the process all along. But that's for another discussion. So to kind of riff off of that, and I know we've done this a little bit, but and we talked about how people are undermining their own doing, so to speak. But I think we can even get a little bit deeper on what they're not doing, or not so much the failure, but how they're undermining themselves before and during and after an interview, and I think we touched a lot on that. But I
Well,
think we
I'll
could
give you a
get
story.
down
I'll
and
give you a story, Mark.
go for it, Teddy.
I publicly share my dirt when my dirt can be beneficial to others to learn from it.
Yeah.
So there's stories that I don't tell because they won't necessarily help anybody. A few years ago, I had a client that wanted me to do some work for them.
Mm-hmm.
And what they wanted me to do was right up my alley, piece of cake. I can do this with my eyes closed. So I told the guy who called me, says, hey, I want to introduce you to my boss. And I said, hey, man, I'd love to talk to your boss. Let me know when she's ready. And I was being cavalier. I was being pompous is what I was being.
Mm-hmm.
So he introduced me to his boss. And we talked for a little bit, and I explained to her how I can do things. And along the way, she used the word, well, I'm going to want to have you interviewed, for the organization. And I'm like, okay, if you want to interview me, that's fine. Just let me know who your interviewer is, and I'll be glad to set up a time to talk with him. I was being very pompous. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She said, oh, I will be the one actually driving the interview, but we'll have the business owners and the board and somebody else. Oh, the business manager and the board will be a part of the conversation. I just screwed up. I was being pompous. I discounted her need to do an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out that the interview was really going to be a conversation with the board, the business manager, and she was going to drive the conversation, introduce me. I failed miserably because I was pompous.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried to backpedal, and she very clearly said to me, I can see you are backpedaling.
She probably did that on purpose to see.
Yeah, she called me out very bluntly. Yeah. I never heard from her ever again. That was probably 3 years ago. I sent her a message about 6 months after, and I told her that I know that I failed, and I apologize for wasting her time and wished her all the best. That was Teddy's attempt to, apologize. But I was pompous. And when you go into an interview and you think you're the best thing ever, and you get arrogant, that will fail every time.
And that's a sample of what we talked about earlier about focus on the employer that's in front of you, not your past, not what you think you could do, because the better approach or the better mindset is how can I meet this person's particular, solve their particular problem. And focus in on solving their problem instead of saying that, oh, you can do anything. And once you go down that road, which is rare, because most people's side on is on the side of I'm not sure, or they're not completely confident. You went in overconfident, and that happens too, Damien.
Yeah. And it can also happen in reverse. Professionals in Transition is a nonprofit. And so I was making a funding call with my board chair.
Mm-hmm.
We set up an appointment at 2:00. The human resources VP first made us wait a half an hour. So we're cooling our heels. And then his assistant called down and said, I'm sorry, he's really busy and he won't be able to see you. Mm-hmm. And my board chair got on and knew him and said, we set this up. I talked to him. I'm a little concerned that after setting this up, he no longer has the time to meet with us. He was being pompous. So in a huff, he came down and, it was like one of those wham, bam, see you, ma'am type interviews because he was pompous. He was so pompous, I had to look up to him because he was so high up there. And what I ended up doing was piercing his pompousness by looking him in the eye and saying something like, I know that this bank came from humble origins, and this particular bank started in a rural city, and they were on top, and a major home improvement company was a hardware store below, and they loaned money to the farmers so they could buy equipment after Sherman went through and, burned everything. And all of a sudden, he looked startled and he said, "How in the world would you know that?" And that was that moment of connection.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, it's on your website." He said, "I've been to our website thousands of times
Mm-hmm.
and I've never seen it." So right then and there, he knew that I had done my research. And then he recovered and he said, "But we don't fund other banks' mistakes. Thank you very much." Out he went. So even though, I got the slap in the face, I wasn't interested then and I'm not interested now, at least by being sincere,
Mm-hmm.
doing my homework, and not being intimidated by a very pompous person who, oh, by the way, got cornered and tossed not a year later.
Mm.
And you talk about a hard fall,
Yeah.
but that's another whole story. But by being sincere, doing your research, not being intimidated, and looking at the person and establishing eye contact as an equal,
Mm-hmm.
I learned many, many things about interviewing that day, and emerged penniless but rich from the exposure and the experience.
Yeah.
And what that has to do with today is that when our folks, everyone who's watching, um, are out there interviewing, remember, regardless of the person's title, they're still a human being. And regardless of how many people they supervise, they still have a problem. They have a hole in the organization. And I know Mark and I have talked about this many times, but if you can memorize, this is a Damienism. If you can memorize these 3 words and let it kind of run through the back of your mind for your entire job search, 3 words: be the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Be the answer to the employer's needs.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Yeah.
you remember that, that will color the whole way that you respond to positions, but even more importantly, the way that you relate to whoever it is that may be able to help you as you interview in the future.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. Good stuff. I think one thing that we come back to is we talk about research, and the reason why I emphasize it so much is people tend to research the wrong things. When you
Mm.
tell them to research, they're researching benefits and they're researching I mean, research the salary, that's good, but you have to understand everything has context. And now that there's a shift between, you can't just look at 2019 and say, oh, this is salary. People are, if you have a remote job and the job is in San Francisco, you're in North Carolina, it's very possible that you're not getting that 2019 salary anymore.
Yeah.
You may be getting the 2021 North Carolina Winston-Salem salary, which is going to be appropriate to your area, possibly. Not to say that that's fair. We can have that another discussion another time, or whether it's going to be appropriate. But you have to consider a lot of the possibilities and be prepared to respond to any of those. And I think that's where a lot of people get wrong. They look at the blanket employer, or they look at the mission statement. They read a few things, and they don't think about how it applies to them and whether it meets their needs, because there's always the need or the strategy of walking away from an interview or from a company that's not going to be the right fit for you. You want to add on to that, Teddy?
Huh. I've walked from an interview, and
Yeah, I have.
in the context of my business, and
Yeah.
when if look, you're a human being, you're in a conversation with other human beings. In your
Mhm.
conversation, you discover that it is blatantly not the right space for you, don't pretend.
Right.
It's disrespectful to yourself to pretend. And when you discover it's not the right fit, you need to let that other person know that you just right then and there. I've just discovered this is not the right fit. Thank you very much for the time you've given me so far. I do not want to, my words, I do not want to burden you any longer with considering me as a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'll never forget, I had a conversation with a business that their ethics on their website were significantly different than the ethics that the business owner was sharing with me in a private conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I was just appalled at the way he thought about how he was going to use social media, which is my business, to get to people and try to hoodwink them into doing business with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I very clearly said to him, I apologize for wasting your time, but this is not the way I do business, and I cannot be a part of this. And
Yeah.
I'll offer you that he came back to me years later and said to me that the business model he was building, he realized in hindsight that it would fail because of the way he was being led to do it. But it's a part of the whole process. Again, what ways do candidates undermine themselves during an interview or in a conversation is that they tolerate a discussion. They tolerate and they do this. Oh, it'll get better. Oh, it'll be okay. And I have a red flag philosophy. When you're interviewing or you're going through the process and red flags start popping up, you can't go, oh, it'll be all right. That I guarantee you, Damien knows dozens of people who've taken jobs that have red flags flapping in their face, and
Yeah.
they go, "Oh man, I should not have done that."
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, I had a similar situation with someone that actually they interviewed with someone, and I think this was some years ago now, but they interviewed with someone and they were very happy about the interview. But I said, well, go back and you still need to research the person that interviewed you, interview and be able to also research the company and some of the employers,
Mhm.
some of the interviewers. And sure enough, this particular, the timing couldn't have been greater because here we have someone in Chicago. Her name is Pam Zeckman.
Mhm.
She interviews every single person that's had a scam in Chicago.
Hmm.
Well, guess who Pam happened to interview? The person that had the scam and one of the people that this person interviewed with.
Was that the
And
mayor?
sure enough, and it had to do with ethics. And this person wouldn't be straight up and had they answered the question and been forthright, it would have been different. Instead, this person ran away with her staff chasing her. And
Wow.
this was on low, and Chicago is a top 10 market. It is not just one of those little cities where, things will just go past by. Millions of people saw this and found out about it.
Hmm.
And so they had to go back and say, yeah, we can't work together. This is not going to work. Even if he doesn't want to even let anybody else know that he interviewed with them because he didn't want the association whatsoever. And there are times like that where
Mhm.
the company may seem to be doing right on the end from your point of view until somebody else comes and questions their point of view, and then now it becomes a scandal. So there are things like that. I've had when I was doing one-on-one clients, had people find out about what someone's philosophy was on a podcast interview that they found. They just happened to be looking, say, hey, let me find out more about this person. And sure enough, this person was a racist.
Wow.
There's been a couple of other times where it went, wow, had you known up front, you wouldn't have wasted your time.
Mhm.
But sometimes that's good to know. At least you know now that they're also a liar.
Right.
So, it's good that you have the power of being able to walk away. Did you want to add anything, Damien, before we start wrapping up?
Yeah, real quick. I turned down a director level position at one of the colleges here in town
Mhm.
because I had a very close friend recruit me to join the company that he was in. 6 months, I was like a conquering hero, untouchable,
Mhm.
and struggled somewhat. But
Mhm.
while I was interviewing, though, I kept seeing like these small, as Teddy would say, red flags. But I kept saying, no, it's just a learning curve. I'll find a way around it, like I usually do. Uh,
Mhm.
but then he got promoted 2 levels above where he was, and a coworker who didn't particularly like me moved into his spot, and I was her first target.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And basically, she sharpened her teeth on me, and then went after anybody else that was over 50, and within less than a year had decimated the workforce, and then brought in a bunch of new college kids that she was able to regiment, control, and even more important, watch, because
Mhm.
she could see everybody's files and everything that they were doing. And then she actually had someone that was like the online police, and they would go in and they would write the people up, and then she would call them in and tick tick tick. But the what Teddy was saying is absolutely true. If
Mhm.
it doesn't feel good on the front end, if your intuition is screaming at you, listen to your intuition, because I'm here to tell you every single time that I have gone against my intuition,
Mhm.
it has ended in a spectacular fashion with me out on my rear in the snow.
And you usually pay less. They bring
Yeah,
in
and
other people to pay less.
one
Yeah.
more bullet point about that, and that is dollars do not mask red flags. It may
Amen.
feel that way. You
Yeah.
may say it's worth it, but don't let dollars, as you're in this process of looking for a job and having an interview, don't say, oh, I'm making enough money from this, I can tolerate that. I can promise you, long term, you won't.
You don't. It wears on you. It wears on you, wears on your well-being, and sometimes creeps over into how you feel physically. We're coming to 2 minutes to the hour. Teddy, you got anything going on or coming up lately that you want the people to know about?
So I thanks for asking. There's 2 other shows that I do every week. I do a Wednesday show at 11:55 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday.
Hmm.
You can find that on my job search website called ncwiseman.com, ncwiseman.com. The other show I do is every Thursday. I do at 9 a.m. I'm a part of a group out of Greensboro called Triad Career Network. We also do, right now, we're doing a Zoom show. That group is about ready to go live in
Hmm.
Greensboro on Thursdays. So we're
Okay.
still putting some pieces together. So hunt me down. You can't, it's not hard to find me. TL Burris, Burriss. If I can help anybody in any way, just message me and ask.
Good deal. Damien, you got anything coming up?
Yeah, a couple kind of interesting things very quickly. Uh, you know how I feel about age mark, which is I've earned every gray hair on my head,
Hmm.
and we've also talked about the fact that Donna, my wife, retired a couple weeks ago, and so we made
Hmm.
that very painful transition onto Medicare. And
Hmm.
as you know, I take a number of prescriptions. Well, anyways, I responded to a reporter, and we were going back and forth about the transition and the bumps and the bruises and the things that are covered and aren't.
Hmm.
What's going to be very interesting is there's an article that will be coming out where we're talking about Medicare, and also the fact that you have to change so much every year. We
Mhm.
just got started on 2021, and already we're going through acrobatic motions for 2022. It will be coming out in Consumer Reports.
Oh, okay, nice.
Uh, and I also just got the green light yesterday to write a story for Up Journey, and the working title is "What Happens When Your Boss Talks to You in Urdu and You Don't Get Along? What you need to do
Mm.
to fix that."
Yeah.
Good stuff. We'll look forward to that article. If anybody is interested in seeing a series, this week, Mier Mardoyan, you can find him on LinkedIn, has presented a series with me this week on various subjects. He has a YouTube channel. If you follow my timeline, you can see the YouTube link and go ahead and support him, support the channel. You don't necessarily have to watch me, but definitely subscribe because he's interviewed a lot of different people. And there's some very interesting content there. So you should check out. I do have a couple of prominent articles that are going to be published over here the next few weeks. That's all I'm going to say about that because I'm really excited about them and the possibility. You guys know how it works. Sometimes you can have an article and do the interview, and the article never comes out. So
Yeah.
that's why I rather not say. But in the meantime, do join me on Wednesday, though, on Job Seeker Nation. That's hashtag Job Seeker Nation. The same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 o'clock Central. And join us back here next week, next Friday. 1 p.m., 12 o'clock Central. We also have a YouTube channel. You can check us out at the Modern Job Search Checklist YouTube channel. Just put it in search engine, it should come right up. And there's about 30 something videos that are on there. Even though we've had more shows, I decided to put the latter shows in the beginning, gave us a chance to look a little bit more polished than we did back at that particular time. But it's also to note that it's been a year since we started this show, Damien. We started the show a year ago and we're still around. So how about that? There's not too many shows that are around that can say they've been here the whole year, showing up most of every week.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we're signing off. Thank you very much, Teddy. Thank you for joining us here. Peace in the Valley of Love. We'll see you guys next Friday.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you,